Okay, so here's a video to help us understand what's undergoing oxidation and reduction, and this is what you would learn when you first start electrochem. So if you're undergoing oxidation, I follow the acronym OIL, and that is oxidation involves loss of electrons. So if you're losing electrons, that means you're becoming more positive. So if you have this number line and you're becoming more positive, that means there's a loss of electrons. Now, here's our example. If you had iron solid, so this would have no charge, so like a 0, and it turns into its ion, like Fe2 positive, right? We went from 0 to positive. That means electrons were lost from iron to make that positive ion. So this would be an example of an oxidation reaction. Now, reduction, on the other hand, involves gain. So I use that acronym REG. So R is reduction, I involves gain of electrons. If you're gaining electrons, it means you're becoming more negative. So if you had a number line, you would become more negative. So here's an example, magnesium's ion, which is 2 positive, turning into magnesium solid, which has no charge. So I went from a positive 2 to 0. We're moving down that number line. That's an example of gaining electrons, becoming more negative. Now, when we're looking at redox reactions and we wanted to figure out what's undergoing oxidation and reduction, and then furthermore saying what's your OA and your RA, we can assign oxidation numbers and then see what's changing. Now, one thing I focus on and tell my students, when you're picking your OA and RA, you are always picking reactants, right? Because that is what's reacting. Products just help us figure it out. So when you have choices, if you ever see products, don't pick them. So let's start with our first example. So assign your fixed numbers, like oxygen is always -2, and hydrogen is always +1. Then we would figure out sulfur, and since we have a neutral atom, we want to add to 0. So -2 times 4 is a total of -8. +1 times 2 is +2. So sulfur would have to be +6 to make this neutral atom. Hi, hydrogen, is +1, which would make I -1 to make the whole thing neutral. On the right-hand side, again, hydrogen's +1. There's 2 of them, so sulfur would have to be -2. Any element alone is just 0, and then hydrogen +1, oxygen -2. So for this first example here, figuring out what's changing, we see that sulfur is going from +6 to -2. That means you're becoming more negative. That would be reduction. You're gaining electrons. So if that's undergoing reduction, that would mean this whole compound is your oxidizing agent. And then when we look at the next part, we have iodine going from -1 to 0. That means we're becoming more positive. That shows that you're losing electrons, so this is undergoing oxidation. And if you're undergoing oxidation, that means you're a reducing agent. So our compound is undergoing oxidation and is a reducing agent. Okay, so let's look at our next example. Doing the same thing, assign your fixed numbers. So oxygen -2, making this a neutral compound. Nitrogen would have to be +1. Hydrogen alone is 0. As a gas. On the right-hand side, hydrogen will be +1, oxygen -2, hydrogen +1. There's 3 of them, so nitrogen would have to be -3 to make that neutral. So let's see what's changing. Nitrogen's going from +1 to -3. That is a gaining of electrons, right? Because we see that it's getting more negative. So this whole compound would be your oxidizing agent. Hydrogen is going from 0 to +1. And it wouldn't matter which hydrogen you brought it to. Either way, you're seeing that change of +1. So that shows you're losing electrons. So this is undergoing oxidation. And if you undergo oxidation, you're a reducing agent. So just to point out one more time, when you're doing this, note we're never picking reactants because we're always picking reactants because that is what's reacting. Products just help us figure out what's happening. Okay, this last example, potassium by itself would be 0. In our compound, we know oxygen is -2. Potassium, simple ion, +1. We need to add to 0, so -2 times 3 is -6, +1 is -5. So to make that neutral, nitrogen has to be +5. Oh, my dog is ready to come in. I'm not sure if you could hear that. Nitrogen on this side is 0, And then this last one, oxygen -2, which would make potassium +1. So seeing what's changing, potassium is going from 0 to +1. That means we are losing electrons, right, getting more positive. So this would be oil, meaning potassium is your reducing agent. And then on the next compound, nitrogen, is going from +5 to 0. That means you're moving down that number line, gaining electrons. So this would be reduction. And if you're undergoing reduction, that means this whole compound is going to be your oxidizing agent. So again, even though it gets confusing, if you're an oxidizing agent, you are undergoing reduction. If you're a reducing agent, you are undergoing oxidation. And always when you're looking at what's becoming your OA and RA, make sure you're looking for a reactant. As always, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please subscribe. And if there's any other video I could ever do for you, just leave me a comment. Thank you for watching.